Today I'm going, today I'm going to address the list of the bands that, according to Andy, destructed rock, and why I think he doesn't understand a few of them. First of all, I have to say that the two experts on jazz that did not take seriously the critique of Andy regarding the uh, similarity of many of modern jazz uh, players that come from programs that have similar ways of teaching and have the similar aesthetic values. Of course, saying everybody is different, unless we clarify the construct and make measures, it's for studies in musicology. But overall, that's a statement that has been repeated many times in the last 25 years. And even acknowledged by Rick Beato, I think Ted Goya, the expert that wrote many books on jazz. It's not something that you need to know quantum physics to observe and be moderately objective. There is no new movement in jazz. It's the first time in history that there is no new movement. Well, you see individuals like Kamashi Washington with an epic, and well, but that has been already done before, and his saxophone playing is not innovative. I mean, he could be excellent, but we've heard these things before. Anyway, I just wanted to give thumbs up to Andy for holding his ground. And I think he's right in this issue. As I mentioned many times, sometimes I have a strong agreement static with Andy. For example, Mahavishnu Orchestra, or why do we like so much the pleasant pheasant on crosswinds? Things of that sort that are beyond expectation of age and cohort. So, on the other hand, sometimes I have a strong disagreement. Like, I would say, the criticism that he launched today over certain artists that he thinks that destroy rock. The first for me is the one I disagree the most, and I think he's off base completely, which is Velvet Underground. He accuses them of starting the fake, pretentious type of pseudo-intellectual rock. To me, that's the sensation I got with progressive rock when I started listening. Empty, complexity and virtuosism to hide lack of emotion and innovation. Mostly lack of emotion and aesthetic musicality, just weird. So I admit that I have my own biases, but Velvet Underground, they were not pretentious. They were really what they were singing. Lou Reed had a degree or studied poetry at the university, I think in Syracuse, with a well-known poet whose name is Delbert Schwartz, published. And that was his ambition, to bring serious literature to rock, to stop talking about cars and girls, 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 and everything that the bands of the 80s made so popular. So he was ahead of his time in the sense of he could have been misogynistic himself, but he at the same time denounced the sexism of the popular music. And more importantly, his talk about and position of gender bending was real, was bisexual, and he married a transsexual, talking that in early 70s. He was way ahead of his times, and he had gods. That's a contrarian than Andy, not being right-wing and individualistic, which is the ideological foundation of the society. But in 1971, marrying a transsexual or living with her, you had to get gods to do that. Fortunately, he also engaged in behaviors that were very destructive, like he was a speed freak, which was not uncommon in that community in New York in those years, in the 60s. But he continued in the 70s. That's why he had that spastic set of movements when he was on stage. He even used to take drugs on stage. I mean, compared to the Doors, they seem babies. He was the wildest thing that that rock and roll has ever seen. Forget about Black Sabbath and heavy and you know killing cats, or I don't know what they were doing, or chickens' heads and blood and all this silliness of the occult. He lived the life of a marginal person that he was singing about. That's why the Waiting on My Man, for My Man has that anxiety that sounds real, or the sounds like heroin or what was the other one? White light, white heat. Well, many. He was really into the game that he represented. There was no fake demeanor there. David Bowie was a great singer, had good songs, and he had a philosophy of breaking the gender barriers, but he was not himself what he let people believe when he was on stage. Lou Reed was everything that he represented. And he got into fights with Warhol. So they left him, or more exactly, Lou Reed left Warhol. To me, he's a great songwriter and write about real things. He was the opposite to the flower power. In that sense, they were like Zappa a little bit. Libertarian Zappa, not believing in the flower power, same Velvet Underground, the demi-monde of the underground life of New York, and both were destined to clash. They were competing for the same spot, so to say. It is unfortunate. The difference is that Velvet Underground were destructive nihilists, while Zappa was not a nihilist, was, I would say, a libertarian, which is different from an anarchist. It's a kind of radical individualism that's popular in the US. Anarchism is just the opposite. It's absolute equality and collectivism. Sometimes people confuse both, but that's not true. So it's unfortunate that at least Andy recognizes that Lou Reed was a good songwriter, and he had, to me, some of the best rock songs, from Perfect Day to I'll Be Your Mirror to Kill Your Songs. Kill Your Songs is heavier than any Black Sabbath. And for Sweet Jane, which to me Van Halen copied in that 1984 record, where they have a kid with wings smoking as the photo of the record. It's very similar to Jump, the song that everybody praises Van Halen for using the synthesizer. There are so many songs that have been copied from Velvet Underground and Lou Reed. In terms of heaviness, to me, nobody beats him in rock and roll, because it's a heaviness based on a hard life, on a street life, and you can feel that. There is no precisely fakeness or pretentiousness there. Just the opposite of what many of the alternative bands that copy them were. Those were fake. but Lou Reed wasn't. That's the big difference. He was a typical New Yorker in some ways, very individualistic, transgressor, and courageous in his individualism and aesthetic, and very convinced that he had something important to say. And his lyrics had, during the period of the maximum drugs, this almost naivete. And then there is the darkness. One can see the contrast between Transformer and Berlin, which is the darkest record that I ever heard. It's so dark that I prefer not to talk about the story of the record, right? So, in terms of heaviness, darkness, realism, actually, I don't think that you can beat Velvet or Lou Reed in particular. Even if they were not good players in the Velvet, but they were very original. And then later on, surrounded himself with the best. The Brecker brothers, Jack Bruce, Ansley Dunbar. I mean, what do you want more than that? Anyway, let's pass to the other bands. With regard to the Ramones, I'm totally in agreement. It's, I don't know how they got this reputation of punk or the great band. And the Sex Pistols with, yes, the poser of the bass player, Sid Vicious. Well, everybody knew that he couldn't play the bass, but since he was so out of control and so destructive, sometimes he could pull it off, like when he was singing his version of I Did It My Way, or My Way, compared to Frank Sinatra. It's tragic and hilarious at the same time to listen to him. It's true that punk in the UK didn't come from nihilism necessarily. Came from the fight against the conditions of the aggressivity of Margaret Thatcher against the working classes of the US and the middle classes, and the reaction of part of the youth that saw no future in a deindustrialized Britain. And this reaction was captured by some of the punk groups. In the US, people like the Ramones did not have at all this connotation. So, if there was something similar, was in the 60s, the MC5, the Stooges, they were not intellectual enough to get into these issues, I think. So there wasn't that many, at least, that achieved a certain level of fame. With regard to, yes, Genesis, ELP, I consider them really pretentious. When I was a kid, I loved them, especially ELP. Now, I only like, from the beginning, the song of Greg Lake. I love his voice, like when he was with King Crimson, in Epitaph, the Court of the Crimson King, etc. And that song did a great job, in my opinion. But Genesis, frankly, a guy with a flower head and strange music, everybody without moving, they look like very bored. I never understood that. As I mentioned, as a kid, I was impressed by Karl Parker. Now I see it almost like a drum machine. No swing, no, it's not my thing. It's a metronome. Yes, the same. I love Close to the Edge, but when I shifted to jazz, I found it very pretentious. I thought they took away the soul, the rhythm and blues from rock and substituted for empty complexity and a kind of unnecessary virtuosity. Of course, I am probably wrong because it's a British invention. Every culture has its own differences in taste, preferences. There's just a guy from Catalonia, right? I would prefer the fusion of Camarón de la Isla in his record La Leyenda del Tiempo, for example. That to me was a huge alternative to progressive rock and to even European fusion. And same with the early, Paco de Lucia since his record Fuente Caudal. So, nothing to say with that. With Kraftwerk, I don't know if it was pretentiousness, I just got bored with them. Again, it's a subjective experience. It's probably that they had the influence. I prefer another group from Germany that had a little bit of this aesthetic called Neu, that had these ambient landscapes of urban noises and simple guitar and drum that felt like a drone, had an hypnotic quality. Madonna, I totally agree with the aggressive attitudes with regard to gender, the Catholic myth of the whore versus the virgin, the use of this to make money, and always surrounded by good producers and songwriters. So we had to recognize that sometimes the songs worked because of who was behind all this montage. And but it's something that I resented to like somehow. It's like if she hadn't had all that money to get Reggie Lucas or Nile Rodgers, what would she have done? And definitely the values of the 80s, of the Reagan Thatcher era of let's say individualistic, materialistic feminism is not something I would endorse. So that definitely I found it very negative over rock rebelliousness. It's just the opposite. There is no rebelliousness in embracing the system. I mean, it's the clearest example of phoniness. With regard to the 90s, I don't think that the grunge killed rock and roll, Nirvana or the others. I thought they gave it a last push with an authentic rebellion of the X generation against their parents, who were hippies that didn't take care of them when they were growing up. It was a simple but honest. In the case of Eddie Vedder, I didn't particularly like it, but I found a lot of honesty in the tales that he recounted of child abuse at school and mistreatment by their parents. That was the expression of this generation. And of course, my favorite band was Soundgarden because of their musicality. They borrow from everybody, from Led Zeppelin quite a bit, and heavier bands, maybe Black Sabbath, etc. But they did a synthesis that worked. It sounded similar. The guitarist, you never knew if he was doing something very original and intellectually sophisticated, or didn't know what he was doing. She was so strange, but it just worked. So that's what matters at the end. So basically, here I finish this evaluation, say, of the list of the bands that destroyed rock and roll. Basically, I agree with everybody, with the exception of Velvet Underground, which I don't think that Andy knew at all what they did, who they were, where they came, etc. So, and there is much more, right? The relation with Bobby, the fights, and Uri was very smart. When they say something that I don't like the Beatles, I particularly didn't. At school there was the Beatles or Rolling Stones. I have to recognize that the first song I liked was one in Rubber Soul, and that I really like Many in Abbey Road and Let It Be, even if I'm not very proud of it. But they knew how to make tunes that were catchy, different, and engaging. But I don't like them very much compared to the Stones, for example. And I don't like their silliness of the lyrics. And when they were serious, I don't like it even less, but I won't get into that. But Uri said something that he don't like the Beatles at all, and that the British bands shouldn't play rock and roll. Yeah, that's a little bit extreme. He was a big fan of ZZ Top, but were the 80s, right? He liked the heavy sound. But he said that there was one song of the Beatles that he loved. It was in John Lennon Imagine Records, which is Mother. And I think he is absolutely right. Mother is the first, to me, serious Beatles song, and maybe the only one. Although Imagine is a nice utopia that the hippie generation can relate to, and others of certain political persuasion, or in general, many people, because of its utopian transcendent feeling. But Mother is really based on reality, and it's a tough song. And I totally agree with Lou Reed. It's the best song of the Beatles ever, in my view. So thank you for listening.